Hello everyone. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm not going to be demoing for you guys, but I'm going to be showing you a series of drawings, and we are going to be talking all about block-in mistakes. Now, this is mostly going to apply to portrait, but we're also going to go a little bit over the common mistakes that can happen in if you're doing like still life or say a cast drawing. So we're going to be looking at those in today's videos. We're going to be looking at old drawings of mine. I had stuck to using just my work for this video because I didn't want to be picking on other people's work, trying to nitpick it for mistakes or for, to point out, flaws or anything. I wanted to keep this very friendly, and I'm just going to be looking at my work mostly from my time as a student. So keep that in mind as you're watching this video. I'm going to be using these pieces to show you guys where I went wrong, mistakes that I've found, as well as how to fix them and how to look out for them so that they don't happen in the first place. Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and take a look at the visual difference between a sketch versus a block-in. So the reason that I'm sharing this with you guys is because this is how I think about it. So you are welcome to disagree. I will not be offended. You can have your own thoughts about drawing and all that. This is how I clarify it for myself. So as you can see in the top line of images here, all these three up here, these are what I would call a sketch. I knew I only had, I think at most 5 hours to draw the figure on the left over there, and I believe the portraits were closer to 2 to 3 hours. And I knew I had a limited amount of time, and I was just like, let's just go for it. Let's just make as finished of a thing as we can in this limited time frame. Whereas the ones on the bottom, as you can see, they have a much less maybe aesthetically pleasing appearance. They, in particular, the drawing all the way on the right over here feels kind of harsh. So it maybe doesn't look terrible, but it's just a very harsh drawing. The middle image that you can see here is just very light. It doesn't look finished. It looks, like it's in a definite like middle place here where there's more that's going to happen, but the process has begun. And then this drawing over here on the far left on the bottom, this is a very finished block-in. So this is the block-in as it looked right before I transferred it to paint it. So that is super helpful to kind of distinguish for yourself. The block-ins, in my opinion, are going to look different. We can go over a couple of the reasons why, and I'm going to point to this middle image up here because you see how kind of undecided some of these lines are. Like, look at how hatchy the halftone is. Look at how vague the eye is. These are all things that are very kind of quickly, vaguely done. This eye over here, you can't even really see what's happening. And that was all fine for a sketch because it was just meant to be at that level and I wasn't going to take it further. But to transfer it would have been incredibly hard, or to render it would have been incredibly hard. I would have been having to make decisions about rendering in this area where I have very little information to go off of. So that's why I consider sketching different, because I'm not trying to set myself up for clarity. I'm, allowing effect to take place. I'm allowing the viewer's brain to kind of fill stuff in instead of having to map things out very clearly for myself. Now let's get on to some of the common mistakes that we can make in block-in. Okay, so the first common mistake we are going to talk about is rushing the envelope. Now, the reason I want to talk about this so much and why I've used this example is because I think it's a very, very easy mistake to make. I think as we're drawing, it's really easy to get excited and want to rush ahead in the process and start incorporating all the details and all the fun stuff before we really get, focus on the head shape or the proportions or things like that. But slowing down in that early stage will really help. And to go ahead and explain that further, the first image that you guys are looking at is what this drawing looked like after day 1. So this is day 1 of a 4-hour pose. So just so you know, all the sessions and days I'm talking about is 4 hours working on this drawing each time. So day 1 after 4 hours. The second image is day 2. So this is what the drawing looked like after 8 hours. And then the third image is, I think, day 14 or something like that. I believe it was about a 2-week pose. So you can see that it took a long time to get to this final result. But I wanted to explain a little bit where we started. Now, after day one, you can kind of see pretty quickly if we look back and forth between days 1 and days 2, where I just kind of rushed the envelope stage. So, what do I mean by the envelope stage? I mean the overall general gesture, proportion, um, big picture idea. The envelope stage can be broken down into really focusing overall on that hair, head, neck shape, so no features. And where you can see that I rushed the hair, head, neck relationships are pretty apparent if you look back and forth between the days 1 and day 2. So after day 1, I had made the hair kind of symmetrical in terms of width on either side, which doesn't make sense for the model's head turn that they have. So I should have had less hair on the left side and more hair on the right side. Another thing was the head neck relationship. So you can see in day 2 how the neck is, kind of angling, maybe ever so slightly angled. Whereas after day 1, I just had the neck coming straight down from the head shape that I had, which makes the model's neck feel a lot thicker than what they actually looked like. This model had a beautiful, elegant neck, and I made it look kind of thick and static. So those were two mistakes that would have been very easily addressed in the envelope stage, but again, I just rushed it. The more nuanced error that I made in still the envelope stage, because I would count the envelope stage as including the shadow shape on the below the chin on the neck, and where you can see that I rushed that was I made it one too narrow, so you can kind of compare the difference, how much wider it is on, or taller, I should say, on day 2. But I also just didn't really take into account the underside of the model's jaw and chin area. And that meant that I just gave myself so much more work on this second day because after day 1, it was just so generic. It was just way too rushed. I hadn't really taken the time to slow down and really think about what I was seeing. The second most common mistake people make is relying on bad measurements. Now, this is different if you're working in site size. Site size is a very kind of controlled way of working, and you're intentionally supposed to rely on your measurements to set up your drawing. So I would say if you're working in site size, then this is probably not the most relatable thing, but if you are working in comparative measurement, then this will probably make sense to you. Now, as you can see here, we have day 1 of this portrait drawing on the left, and then we have day 3 on the right. Now, I think you can probably pretty quickly see where I went wrong. I took a measurement for the bottom of the chin to the top of the head, and I compared that to the width. Now, I trusted that measurement pretty early on in this process. So I was like, okay, I got that measurement locked in. I'll, make my drawing fit to those measurements. As a result, I kept thinking, I was like, oh, I must be doing something with the mask of the face. That's why it's feeling a little strange. And it wasn't until day 3 where I realized nothing I was doing was making it feel closer, more accurate. It wasn't really giving me the likeness of the model. All of that was coming into play, and I realized, oh, my measurement was wrong. And as you can see the ghost lines here, where there was a ghost line here and a ghost line here, where I had to significantly bring in the portrait because I just had my measurements in the wrong spot. It was a bad measurement that I relied on, and I didn't trust my eye. I was convinced I was doing something else wrong. And what that ended up doing was it severely delayed the progress of this drawing. Again, I don't think it necessarily ruined it. I don't think it ended up being a bad drawing, but it did delay it. So if I would have trusted my eyes more than my measurements, I would have been able to progress this drawing a little bit more quickly and maybe spent a little bit more time focusing on things like likeness or even maybe getting a little bit more into this ear and the structure of that if I would have just, trusted my eye and not the measurements, that something was wrong. And as far as how to fix that, I would say that it is pretty essential to practice drawing without measuring at all. So one thing that I really enjoy doing is kind of getting out a small piece of paper. And for example, so say this is I believe this was maybe like a 14 by 17 piece of paper. So get out a smaller piece of paper or just in the bottom corner of your drawing here, draw the, same subject matter, whatever you're looking at, just small. Draw it really tiny without measurements, just focusing on capturing a little image of your subject matter. And when you do that, you will find that you're training your eyes to see better. And by pushing yourself to really make those judgments by eye, you're literally just training your eyes to see things and capture things accurately. Okay, so this brings me to a personal favorite mistake that I think is very common when working on block ends, and that is frontalizing. So in this case, I have the drawing on the left as an example of where things went wrong, and the drawing on the right as an example of where things went right. And to quickly talk about what frontalizing is simply a way of a funny word for turning something towards you. So when we frontalize things, we might take a model's portrait that's in 3/4, and then we just tip certain features towards us to where they look a little bit more straight on. Now, I picked this example on the left because I think this is one of the drawings where I just never really managed to catch the error in time. I don't think I ever did end up fixing that in the final image. Maybe I did. I'd have to look back at the final painting, but I don't think I did catch this one. I think it just lived on. And that was I turned her nose towards me. So her nose in this drawing looks honestly a little bit longer on this side and a little bit shorter on this side, when that completely disagrees with the view that I have of this model's head. Her head's turning away from me. It's a 3/4 where she's tipping towards the left, and I've drawn the left side of her nose as bigger and longer than the right side. So I've quite literally frontalized her nose towards me. I didn't do it so badly with the mouth or with the eyes, but with the nose, it's just completely out of alignment. And you can see I even did attempt to have a center line going down her face to catch this, and I just still didn't even manage to catch it. I kind of paid attention to where the center of her nose should be, but I didn't orient the kind of sides of her nose, the nostrils, to agree with that orientation. So her nose is frontalized. It's tipped towards me. If you guys remember the first slide that we looked at, or the first mistake we looked at where I had that model's hair as kind of even on both sides of their head, even though they were also in a 3/4 position, tipped away towards the left, that was also frontalizing. So that's what I want you guys to be aware of, and just keep in mind while you're working on a portrait, even if you're working on a still life or something in perspective, these are all areas where we can tip things towards ourselves without meaning to, and it throws things a little bit out of perspective and just makes them a little bit funny looking. Now, a couple things to help with that is looking at something in a mirror, so looking at it in reverse. Even tipping it upside down is helpful for that because we just start to see things a little bit more abstractly. And those are probably the best pieces of advice for how to correct frontalizing, as well as just taking a break, walking away. But personally for me, it was not something that I even knew to look for in my drawings whenever I was first starting at the ateliers and at art schools, because I just did not realize that that was a tendency to tip things towards myself. I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know that it was kind of a common error, and so I just wasn't on the lookout for it. And the second I became aware of it, it became a lot easier to spot. And trust me, when you start noticing it in your own work, it'll be like a little bit of a light bulb moment, and you'll be able to fix it from there. This brings us to our last most common mistake, which for our purposes, I'm going to call it fixating, but you could also think about it as drawing out of scale, out of proportion, or just simply forgetting to look at the whole. Now, this kind of relates to our first most common mistake, which is rushing the envelope, but we're going to go ahead and dive into these two portrait drawings to explain why I think the one on the right is a little bit stronger than the one on the left. You are going to have to trust me a little bit since obviously I don't have photos of these models because these were both done from life, but I do know for a fact that the one on the right has a better likeness than the one on the left. Now, this particular mistake I think especially applies to anything that we might draw, still life, interiors, landscapes, anything. You really can apply this specific mistake to any of the things because essentially it's where you end up drawing one portion of your drawing kind of in isolation and you forget to look at how it relates to the rest of the drawing. So where that happened on this one on the left is I drew this whole model's portrait very squished and tiny. And I know that this is not what this model looks like. He did not have this squished of a face. In fact, I remember stepping back at the very end of this drawing, which was just done over a couple nights, more than a sketch, but not a long-term drawing. And I realized, I was like, I just made this look like a baby version of the model. And he was not a baby. He was a grown adult obviously with facial hair. And I just kind of squished all his features together and it made him look weirdly young. So the other thing I did was I kind of drew his ear kind of too high and too small. Again, just out of proportion. I was just completely out of scale here. And that's okay. I didn't have time to fix it on this particular drawing. And, there's people that I think would argue that, you don't get to see the model at this point, so what does it really matter? And they do have a little bit of a point. I'm not saying that this is a drawing that is worth, tearing up and throwing away. It's not worth being dramatic over, but it is an error. And it was something that if I would have just remembered to go back, like, okay, what is the overall head shape saying? Should I, maybe the mouth is a little bit too high, maybe the eyes are a little too low, maybe the ear could come down a little bit. If I would have worked a little bit more all over, thinking not so much like, let me draw the mouth now, let me draw the eye now, which is kind of the mindset I had with this drawing. I was kind of just fixating, drawing one thing, two things. If I would have instead been thinking, what does the whole portrait say? What does the whole gesture say? What is this model's likeness telling me? Then I would have been able to avoid some of the kind of silly squishing of the features that has gone on here instead. So that's a very common mistake. You could think about it as if you were drawing a still life and you ended up having a bouquet of flowers in a big vase, and in your final drawing, the vase looked tiny and the bouquet of flowers looked huge, or even vice versa. Just think about it as like the things have gone out of scale. I hope that video was helpful for you all. Thank you so much to the person who recommended this video idea in the comments of a previous video, which I do also just want to use as a reminder to you all to leave your own suggestions, ideas, thoughts in the comments below, because I do really seriously consider them as I'm planning out my videos, and so I'd love to hear what you guys would like to see. So all that being said, I will go ahead and see you guys in the next video.